So, dude, welcome to Lead by Design. I've been wanting to have you on the show ever since we first met. I, for many reasons. One of those reasons is that you remind me a lot of Brendan Fraser in his youth. In a, and I mean it in the best way possible.
I get that all the time. I get that all the time.
You do?
I like to think that there's a world where just once someone's going to have a conversation with Brendan and be like, you remind me of this guy, Josh Stinton. It's never going to happen. But
Okay, it's not
but I
just
like
me.
no, I've actually got that so much. And a funny story is I've actually been in a movie with him randomly. I was in,
No kidding.
I was,
Let me guess, you
I
was a
was in,
stunt double.
yeah, exactly. No, I was an extra in a movie called Extraordinary Measures that was filmed in Portland, Oregon,
Okay.
and he was the lead character. And there was a couple times where he and I were standing side by side, and I was like, oh. Yeah, because I've been hearing that since I was a little kid. Oh, not a little kid, but like a younger guy, a little kid. I guess no one's coming up to 4-year-old me and saying you look like some guy named Brendan
A
Fraser.
littler kid than you are now. Well,
A littler kid. No.
let me tell you specifically, though. I can see the resemblance as well in terms of looks, but it wasn't that. It was actually that when I saw you on LinkedIn, I saw your video, and it'd be nice to tell listeners and people watching this how we met. But I saw that you had a larger than life personality, and I'm always a little bit skeptical about this because when I see larger than life personality and then I read someone's bio and there's essentially some variation of a motivational speaker, and no offense, but and I've been accused of being that as well, and I know that you're a lot more than that, which is why we're talking now as well.
I get it.
And then when we actually connected, there was this authenticity to your charisma that came across even in the short conversation that we had, and with that authenticity, there was a warmth. And that's how I think about Brendan Fraser in his prime as well. And now I'm going to be thinking of Josh Stinton as that, which is that you're incredibly charismatic, not just conventionally good looking, but your caring that is in your story that's weaved into your narrative really comes across in your personality and your just your demeanor and your presentation. And it's not like I was trying to crack it or anything, or trying to find where's the act. Not consciously, because I just talk to you very normally, but I can tell if there are cracks. I've become good at that because I've been in the public speaking scene myself as well. And man, I'm just really happy to meet someone that has the ability to have that impactful communication like yourself, whilst also being very genuine and authentic, whilst also doing so much good in the world. So thanks for making the time to talk to me and to get to know me as well.
I'm honored. Oh, thank you, man. What a way to start my day here in Oslo with such lovely comments from yourself, man. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I side with you on that, because when you read bios, I mean, we're all supposed to, it's what did Chris Rock say in one of his stand-up shows? He said, when you're first meeting someone, you're never meeting them, you're meeting their representative. So so
Right.
sometimes it takes a little to kind of connect it when you and most times the way we meet people is we're meeting their online representative of it's like this and that and keynote speaker or whatever it is. And I side with you on that. Sometimes it's really nice to meet people and connect, kind of past the bio lines, and same thing goes for you, my friend. And because we had our conversation, a while back, but then also, the really kind dialogue that we've had since then, and your kind invitation to be here. So you walk the mile as well, my friend. So I appreciate that. Thank you. It's very kind of you.
Hey, you're welcome. Looking forward to walking a few more miles together into the future.
Yeah, let's tie these shoes.
Absolutely. So, like I said, it'd be cool to let people know how we actually met. You made a post on LinkedIn inviting people into 15-minute slots in the conversation, and then I very enthusiastically took you up on that. I'm curious if you could just talk to a little bit about what was the story behind that, what inspired you to do it, and have you met any other really cool people besides me?
Not as cool. It's going to be a very, very long time for the again. Thanks, man. So I remember when I was a young guy, my grandfather always used to say, if you can help other people, it's not an opportunity, it's a responsibility. And he used to go out of his way to do that. Is super inspiring. I remember we used to, he was in South Dakota, So my family came from South Dakota in the States. We actually came over from Norway in the UK. Now I'm going way back in the timeline.
Oh,
But
right.
we landed,
You got roots
it's, and
in Norway
I do,
as well. Right. Okay.
I do, yeah, from the west coast of Norway. And so when we landed in the States, we landed in South Dakota. And so anyways, so stayed there for a couple generations. And so I was, as a kid, even though I come from Denver, Colorado, I would spend my summers in South Dakota with my grandparents. And that was probably some of the most impactful time in definitely my formative life, because my grandparents were really driven by care and community service, and they understood that we were part of a broader system, right? And I remember my grandpa, he would have these like I'm from memory, I think it was like once a summer, or maybe a couple times a summer. We'd load his pickup truck and drive around and give things away, right? So we would give produce from the fields, so they were farmers, so they had crops, and we'd give tools. He would just connect with the neighbors, and he knew most people in the broader area, which was probably 40 people. There was not that many people, but so easy to keep a list. And I would drive around with him, and he would give things away. And I remember he was a very playful man. His name's Wesley Stinton. He's passed away, but he was always quite funny and laughing about things. But on these trips, he was very serious. His demeanor changed, and he was always quite like almost stern looking. And I remember being in the pickup. I was like 7 years old. And I'm thinking with childhood economics, I'm thinking, why are we giving these things away? We could be trading for money, and that money could probably be more toys for me at some point. And I remember he was so strict, and he would always say that. He's like, if you can help people, it's not an opportunity, it's a responsibility, because what you're seeing us doing is actually part of our job. And it was, if in town, if I remember one in particular, a woman's husband had passed away. So he would go and make sure that, everything was working well in her house, and she was as comfortable as could be, and bring over some supplies as needed. And he just did that for multiple people. And I was always really inspired by that. I remember talking about it with my dad, and my dad's very much a same way. He's a big pillar of his community, and I always aspired to be that. And it's funny because community means something, maybe it can mean different things nowadays, obviously with the advent of the internet and social media, etc. So the way that they would impact their community, and I could go on about my father and my mother as well, and their efforts to build community. So for me, like, I'm not a farmer. If I had to make a living because of my farming skills, I'd be a very hungry person. But what I do have is my time. And so that's something I've always been driven by. So I with these adventures for children's charities, and same thing with LinkedIn, I found a really interesting way to build a community and kind of provide a way to give back by these things that I called help chats. For better or worse, they're just help chats. Not that everybody needs help, but I just thought, well, I've been super fortunate to meet many amazing women and men around the world doing incredible things. And I've been involved in some really wild projects, and I've learned a lot of things along the way. And I just wondered, this was years ago that I first started doing it. I thought, well, due to the things that I've learned, maybe there's people out there that would be interested in a 15-minute conversation about a thing that's on their mind, and maybe something in my world could help them. And so I've just stuck with that. So every Wednesday I do these 3 times 15-minute conversations. That's how I met your lovely self. And yeah, I have met a lot of really great people, and it's really nice to hear from, years ago, someone will reach out and tell me about, oh, actually that connection that you thought I should maybe make. Now we've actually started a business. There's someone in Ireland that started a sustainable wetsuit clothing brand that I've heard of just a little while ago, and it's just really fun because it is so minimal effort on my part. It's just, for me, it's me starting my Wednesday mornings in Europe time at Wednesday mornings, and just meeting really interesting people, hearing really fascinating stories. Sometimes it's people giving me a tip about something, and it's nice because I feel that I've tried, I feel like I'm still learning it, but like I've tried to learn from my grandparents that if you go into any environment from the perspective of giving, that actually fills your cup. It really gives you a lot back. I've made a friend in yourself, and I've learned a lot about you in our email exchanges as well. And it's just something I'm going to continue to do. I'm going to continue to do forever in various shapes and sizes. And the things that I've learned, some of the red threads and some of the insights that I've gained from speaking with people from literally all over the world in these conversations has given me a lot of content for my keynote talks. Now, I'm never ever going to share anyone's name or personal story or circumstance, but just the red threads, like the high level view of what it is people globally are generally talking about is not something I intended to get, but it's just quite interesting to talk about, what, or to learn and be able to share with others what people generally are doing in their approach in the pursuit of a goal, or their approach in finding out is what goal is even relevant for them. So it's been wildly giving, which was not the intent, but it's really interesting.
I take a lot of inspiration from what you're saying and thinking about how can I incorporate a more regular time slot into my schedule to make myself available like that. That's really cool. I can imagine with your business design background, I want to talk about this a bit more specifically in a moment as well, but with that, you've got a default systems thinking lens that you're always looking through as well, which means that probably helps you recognize those patterns and trends that you're alluding to. So what are you seeing these days, given that you're speaking to so many people?
It's really interesting. And it's usually one of two things I find generally. It is, I don't know what I would like to connect to a purpose, like a higher purpose, or I'd like to connect with a goal. So therefore, what could be advice that would help people try to find something that would give them passion and purpose and drive? So that's kind of one aspect of it. And the other is I'm on a goal, but how do I maintain resiliency to stay the course? I would say those are the two, I mean, if we were to word cloud this thing, those are the two things that show up in a greater way. And of course, sometimes there's a bit more pinpoint things that, people have a question about something specific off to the side. But I would say those are the two things. And for me, it's really, I find a lot of peace in that because if we were able to zoom out, and again, I never share anyone's personal story or information or anything like that. I don't even get, retain any data from it or anything like that. But if people were able to see the things that I've been able to see, it's really beautiful, right? It's really nice, the journey that regardless of any, insert any demographic here, geographic or otherwise, but we're always either in the pursuit of a thing or the question about the pursuit of a thing, and it's been really, really nice. It's very humbling to learn about other people's journeys and thankfully be able to contribute to other people's journeys as well.
Yeah. Okay. I want to pause for a moment. I'm just going to refer to my notes here, a little bit of homework I did. So I found your bio. I'm not going to read it in full, but your bio from the London Speaker Bureau and your listing on that.
Yep.
One thing that stood out to me from this is the bio mentions that your journey began with TEDx Sydney production team. You moved through deep explorations of business design modeling at PwC. I know that was also in Australia. You studied at Mac Uni as well.
Yep.
And then Josh learned that the key to driving meaningful change in organizations lies in aligning teams around a shared purpose and fostering genuine collaboration. Then it goes on to say that as a global adventurer, he takes on extreme challenges in which he has little or no prior experience, and he does so to uncover and share insights that apply to both life and business. And you've done some really cool things, and we'll weave that into the story. You've spoken about it in other podcasts and in other places as well, and it's part of your keynotes. What I want to know is what has been the pivotal driver behind bringing these things together? And particularly, you've spoken about this before, about wanting to be proud of, or at least want to read the book that you're writing that is the story of your life. And I find,
Perfect.
yeah, I find that really, really inspiring. And particularly in relation to what you said, you're noticing about people not only trying to figure out how to pursue the goals that they have, but also defining goals or purpose or meaningfulness in their life. One thing that I couldn't find in my homework and research that I was really curious about is, when did you sort of hit your head on the floor or something and go from working in corporate organizations and offices to stumbling upon these adventures, but not just for the adventure's sake. I'm really curious how these two things came together.
Nice, man. Great questions. I've hit my head so many times. there's been many moments along the way, and it's funny. It's like when inspiration. I've kind of picture inspiration as this third party entity. There's this thing out there that visits you sometimes, and if you're just not ready for it, or if you don't have the right mindset and very much the right language, then inspiration will bounce off of you and go find someone that's ready. Yeah. And I know that I've been visited by it many times, and I've kindly or sometimes grudgingly asked it to get the heck out of my life because I wasn't ready for it. But when I started to become a bit more open to it, was I was at the time, so I was working with PwC in Australia for a number of years, and then I went on to work for KPMG for a couple of years as well. I was the manager of the innovation team there at the time.
Yeah.
And in that world, they're constantly working around teams and change. We started working with startups as well. There was a lot of, this is back in like 2014, 15, 16, where there was like chief innovation officers and innovation teams and companies. And sometimes that was just, they would hire people, and those were the people that wore colorful socks in the office and just tried to do things a little bit different. We're trying to figure out what this innovation thing is.
Yeah, I think the Sydney Startup Hub was just opening around that time as well. Interesting.
That's right. Yes, it was. Yeah. Absolutely. And there was a group called Fish Burners.
Oh yeah,
back when.
All those. Yep.
Yeah. So I used to host panel conversation at Fish Burners back when, and started.
I was on a panel once at Fish Burners, but I'm not sure if I don't remember meeting you there.
Yeah, I would know that I would remember meeting you, but I was there. Gosh, this is quite a few years ago as well, and I just knew it was just interesting. Again, this is back to me owing a debt of gratitude for being in Australia, because there was this interesting tide that was rising in Australia where people were really connecting to the work that innovation was actually doing, and of course, well, if you're going to innovate, well, there's no solo heroes, right? So it's not just a person being super innovative and then driving that. I mean, that you have to have the vision and have people around you and supporting and panel beating your ideas and having different conversations. And so I loved working in that, working in KPMG for a number of years, and also PwC prior to that, because I worked in a similar capacity there in the place called The Difference in PwC. And it was all about kind of quite meaningful collaboration, often working on culture and behavior and really what made teams tick. And in that environment, well, at that time, rather, I met a guy. This guy, his name is James Thomas, and his wife, shortly after met his wife as well, Christy. And they were both very passionate, and still are to this day, very passionate about starting a children's charity that was focused on helping Australian kids learn to live with grief, and because they both experienced grief in their lives when they were quite young, and by losing family members, and they realized that there's two people out there. There's people that have experienced grief, and there's people that will experience grief, and when you're young, it's really, really hard for young people to kind of comprehend that they're not alone, because a lot of times if they've lost a loved one or a mother or a sibling, it's really hard for them to see a world where that can happen to other people. So therefore they start to feel different, maybe alienated, and that can have compounded effects. So the fact they wanted to do that, I was like, oh my goodness, I was just really moved by their story and how real it was because they'd experienced it themselves. And that started to dovetail. So these guys, I started really paying attention to what they were doing, and that started to dovetail into my thinking around, work and collaboration and culture that I was doing, working with like HSBC and Australian government and all sorts of different, very large organizations. And it was all the same. as people that were in teams that are driven for a purpose, it's higher than themselves. And I feel that's where there's a lot of magic that happens. And when people around a table or in a room or across the world, but working on the same thing, there's a lot of magic in that, and being able to be a part of that has always really inspired me. So for me, my story, and I like to be very clear about this on stage, my story isn't I left the corporate world and now I'm joined a life of adventure and Instagram and a beautiful partner in a van. That's not me. And like, I love my job at KPMG. I still am in contact with a lot of people there. My director, his name was Nick Lotes, was super instrumental in my mindset shift to go from doing what I was doing to go into what I have been doing. And so for me, it's not one and the same. I think some people have this mindset of only when I shed this skin, will I then be able to grow anew? Only when I drop this job or leave this thing. We're in a constant continuance. This narrative are these micro building blocks of what it is we're engaged in on a regular basis are constantly developing the foundation of who we are and what we do. And one thing that I've learned is that acting with grace and gratitude, well, mind you, I've not always done that in my life, but acting as best we can with that, because the things we might be, maybe someone listening to this, maybe multiple people listening to this, we might not be in a circumstance that we envision that we really want to be in. Maybe when we think back to our younger selves and we put ourselves in those tinier shoes and we think about adult us, that adult us was supposed to be having more fun right now. We were supposed to be relaxing more. We were supposed to be engaging or whatever that is. But the thing is we're always in the trajectory of a thing. And whether or not we are very happy in our current roles or with our current relationship or with our current neighbor that's always doing construction or, whatever it is, the way that we have gratitude for how it is that we got to where we are, and B, realize that we can always have conversations or listen to a podcast or, connect with someone that can and will fundamentally change the direction of what it is that we're doing. And so for me, it was absolutely not, I'm really passionate to do these adventures or to be a keynote speaker, and because that was never part of it. I'm still very grateful and very surprised that that's a big part of my life. But it's the fact that it's like there's a flow, and things that these building blocks that we gain, sometimes we realize, okay, the shape and color of the way that this structure is going isn't quite what I want, but we can constantly change that. And sometimes there's this mindset of, I need to tear this whole building down and start new. Well, then therein lies how do I go about doing that? Well, that's a very, very hard task that we give ourselves unnecessarily. I think on a regular basis, we're constantly able to slowly shift the things that we're working on into a shape that does fit us better at that time, because we're constantly changing, and these shapes of what we're building for ourselves are constantly evolving as well. So it wasn't a conversation, but it was a series of meetings. It was a series of happenstances. And it was for me being more open to the fact that, every conversation I get into or everything that I engage or give my time to is starting to shape that thing that I want to become, as opposed to, sometimes we hear, and it can create even envy in me when I hear about these things of, I met that person and it changed my life forever. Now everything's great. And so of course, and it's like, well, that's not fair, because then everyone's thinking, well, where do I get to my juncture? Like, where's my fork in the road? I've been working so hard and these left turns are not showing up. And that's difficult, because then it's just distancing us even further from the mindset that is required to be able to bring great things into your life. And that is the fact that, being able to meet one person, have one conversation, but working from a mindset that this is probably exciting, working from a mindset of what feels good in us, and then appreciating that everything that we've got going on is getting us towards that point. But also, I think it's really interesting when I say point, because one thing, in 43 years of walking around on this big rock, is that it's never a point, is it? There's always another thing. I'm in the process of something. And so it's just that appreciating that the evolution as we're going is actually the point. I think my tea was higher caffeinated than I think. That was a lot of words yet again.
No, it was very inspiring. The thing specifically that inspired me to think of is that, going back to this metaphor of what book do you want your life to be and would you want to read that book? I think it's so much easier, significantly easier, maybe even only possible to figure out where your chapter markers are in retrospect, in hindsight. But when we think about feeling inspired by somebody else's story, somebody else's journey, we think, oh, I really want the next chapter of my life to not necessarily look like this, but just feel like I'd at least want that chapter to be worth reading or talking about. And yet it's very difficult to figure out, where do I actually put that marker to say I need to close this chapter and start this next chapter, without simply just living through it and then finding yourself in hindsight being able to write your story so far and then divide it up into neat chapters. So a part of me asking that question that I asked you was to understand how your chapters have sort of been written in retrospect. And it sounds like there's a lot of fluidity through your story and a lot of appreciation of serendipity and being blessed by various conversations and interactions that you've had. But also now, when you look at your public profile, your public persona, and I appreciate, I appreciate it, but I know a lot of my listeners will also appreciate this, that it's just a part of writing a bio for a speaker kit, that it's going to come across as there was this chapter and now there's this chapter. I was doing this and now I'm doing this, and it's rarely that cut and dry.
I so wildly rarely that cut and dry, and it's so interesting. It's like, it's like, we love, especially in writing speaker bios, we love expediting the hero's journey, right? It's like, I was doing this thing and then I went to the other side of the mountain and now I'm back and now it's this thing. And it's like,
that's a great way to put it. That's exactly what it is. It is really condensing it all down into this hero's journey, so that you can also you can mythologize yourself, which is fine. I'm not judging or criticizing that. I think that is a part of good storytelling, right? That you need to do that.
It is a part of good storytelling, and especially there's the 40-minute keynote. Now, if we're speaking specifically about keynote speaking, but this applies to so many different things, CVs or a first date or, whatever. There's always this like expedited story that we pitch, but then, that's actually the journey to there is often a big and winding road. And it's really funny how we expect ourselves. I haven't thought about it like this before, but I think it's so spot on. I think I just complimented myself, excuse me. But we expect but we expect ourselves to be so aware and so calculated and so at the right place at the right time all the time to be able to design that perfect future for ourselves. Because it's our birthright. I think everyone has the right to have a fantastic life and live it to the fullest. And that's why we're here, to create and enjoy and to support each other along the way, truly. But the fact that we expect ourselves to be of a mindset to be able to do that on our own will alone and at any time, I think is ridiculously unfair. I think it's so many stumbling blocks. It's not this, I took, I mean, certainly there's meeting certain people, there's experiencing certain things, or there's finding that right book at the right time, whatever our impeti are, along the way. But it's just being open and appreciating that every day, every day there's something that's going to shape us. But it's tricky because we love, I'm a very analog person, we love writing our task lists and the things, which is good because that kind of starts to turn the overall ship in certain directions, which is really good. But to really hone in on what island you're going to land on is just steering every single day. It's being aware of the weather, aware of how you feel at the time. It's being aware of the people around you. Sometimes it requires sacrifice, meaning sometimes the people that we're, to continue with the sailing analogy, sometimes the people that we're on the boat with aren't helping with that journey. And that's okay. We don't have to label them as bad people, but sometimes they're better for other boats. Sometimes I'm that person that's no good for that boat. And sometimes, it's better if I'm probably on someone else's boat, whatever that is. But it's never knee-jerk reactions. It's a series of nudges that kind of get us in the right way. And I think the more that we connect with that, the more peace that there is in it. Because if we genuinely believe, I'm going a little deep here, but I truly believe in it. Like, if we genuinely believe that life is good, because there's all sorts of circumstances that would indicate the other, and I appreciate that. But if we genuinely believe that life is good and we're here to have a good time, if we just flip, even if it really doesn't feel like it and so many people have so many valid reasons for that, but even just that little switch flip of, if we're here to have a good time, and even if I'm not feeling good in myself, helping someone else will help you feel that much better. I mean, if there's no other proof that we're a part of a system that rewards you for connecting with other people, then I think that's the core of it. But if we help other people, not with the sole purpose of, if I do this, then that, but just help because that's the right thing to do, then it's incredible how that ship starts to find its course, and things start to come along, and other people get on board, and some people, join other journeys, and I think that's the magic. I think that's the fun part of it all, as opposed to, I've got this degree, I've got this experience, and my mom says I'm the most amazing thing in the world, so everything needs to work as a part of my plan. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. It's good to have a confident mindset, but yeah, without understanding that we're a part of a broader whole, that everybody requires help. I mean, I certainly do all the freaking time. Yeah, I hope I didn't get us off track too much. That was a little bit of a tangent again.
No, the ship has been traversing the ocean, and there's a lot of different places to go.
But I have a lot of fun thinking on that, because especially in a lot of these help chat conversations that I have with people, or giving a keynote, and then going to a networking event after a talk, or just meeting folks, and one thing that seems to kind of show up is, what was the thing, or where's the thing? And for me, it's funny because I'm constantly in a state of growth. I'm constantly in a state of change, and I'm often in a state of like, I wonder what about over there, or what about, well, if only this was different, then how? Because that's life. I think that I think the purpose is not to find these road, like, detours that have been put into our path, or we try to put ourselves in front of them. That's not the purpose. It's going to sound so cheesy, but it's to just enjoy the ride, and it's just to really appreciate that generally understand where we're wanting to go. And if people, and if someone's listening to this and thinking, yeah, great, Josh, but I don't know what my North Star is, like, I don't know what my passion is, my friend, you are so not alone. I mean, there's so many people, myself included, on a regular basis, feel a bit lost, or don't feel connected to what it is that I'm doing. That's okay. But what it is just to I find hitting a reset button. I'm starting to put this into more talks, and that is because there's all sorts of noise, these devices and all sorts of things around us that constantly have inputs for us. But just hitting a bit of a reset button and finding a little silence and solitude where you can, because I understand sometimes, with kids and family and, various things floating around, it's not always easy to find you time. But to the best of your ability, I think it's easier to find than most people give credit for, because we
I
fill our
agree.
time with a lot of, yeah, but I don't have enough time to myself. But then when we have time, it's scrolling or it's doing whatever. But really designing in a bit of just even 30 minutes, 15 minutes of just trying to think about things that make you feel good, right? Like, what environment, how do other people, how are other people impacted when you're in a circumstance that makes you feel good? That's an interesting question, because when you work from that position, then it doesn't have to be as defined as it's this city at this time and it's in that building in between these hours, right? Like
Mm.
but in general, like, there is an environment that will start to reveal itself that that exists, that where when you feel good and you understand how other people are positively impacted by that, when that starts to show itself, then we know where we should start to point our ship,
Can you
I
repeat that
believe.
question?
So to repeat it is, if we are able to press pause
Mhm.
and just give ourselves a bit of space outside of all the noise of whatever social media, our personal lives, work, etc., and just meditate a bit on what it is that makes you feel good. So this comes in two parts.
Mhm.
What makes you feel good, and how are other people around you positively impacted while you're in that space of feeling good?
Mm.
Because when we think about that, I think then these interesting pathways, and they're not going to be, these aren't signposted all along the way as direct instructions on how to get there, but that's kind of life. But these pathways will start to show up when you can start to just think of, don't over define it, but just think of what makes me feel good and how do other people around me feel while I'm in that circumstance. And if other people around you are feeling good because you're feeling good, what is it? Then you can start to ask, like, well, from that position, what are the things that I'm doing? What makes me feel good? Because I think a lot of times we think, what makes me feel good? Well, I need to have this. I need to have that. I need to earn more money. I need to. And even that mindset alone just kind of reiterates to your own narrative that you don't have it. And so therefore it's really hard to feel like you're going to get it, because you're constantly distancing yourself. But rather just coming from a position of, this feels really nice. And for me, another accelerator in that is, this feels nice for me. And also, how is it good for other people? And mm, that's when things start to arise, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
Absolutely. It makes me
Yeah.
think that it's a call to be in the most positive state that you can be, is actually going to be the most empowering thing for you to be of service to other people as well.
Nailed it.
Not, yeah. I I caveat this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this caveat because I find this a very interesting point as well. The caveat being that it's not about toxic positivity, which is which is so much in the dialogue of the internets and society
Oh,
generally these days. But I think people. The reason I wanted to talk about this caveat is because people have a lot of fear of being toxically positive or being over the top or rah rah or woo woo, and there are all these terms, and you know, woke is another thing altogether. But I don't want to get into that word because I feel like that word has very specific cultural implications, whereas these other things are just sentiments that linger around. And you know, you've lived in Australia long enough to know about the tall poppy syndrome part of the culture here as well. But I feel like people apply that to themselves a lot more than they do to anyone else, where we might admire a tall poppy, but we would never give ourselves permission to grow as a poppy ourselves. And so being in that state or being invited to connect with ourselves in that state can feel like you're inviting me to be selfish. How is that going to be of service? So I'm going to focus my attention on all of the things that cause me to suffer. And even if I'm not wallowing in that, I'm going to stay in problem solving mode rather than growth mode. And I find that really, as you said earlier, with your compliment to yourself, it's spot on. It's a really great call to arms. One thing, Josh, I really am curious about is, so when I named the show Lead by Design, it started with this idea of thinking about design leadership. And it evolved from there to think about, well, really, what does it mean to lead a team of people in an organizational context and setting mindfully and intentionally? And it evolved from there. And when I say evolved, I mean like, you know, within the conversation with my head in the process of designing this show, to leading yourself, right? Leading yourself with mindful intention, leading your life by design. And you alluded to that term earlier as well, life by design. And what I found over the years of being a personal development junkie and you know, a self-help addict and all that kind of stuff, is that a lot of advice and motivation and inspiration is directed to people to answer the question, how do you achieve what you want? There is an incredibly higher amount of that compared to how do you feel connected to something so that you actually want something more than just getting by on a day-to-day basis. And relating this back to what I was saying about the self-inflicting the tall poppy syndrome on ourselves, is that I encounter a lot of people, not only in my coaching practice, but just amongst friends and family, that feel like there's almost a shame attached to wanting more because everyone else is suffering. You know, we're living in a world where most people but it's what people would say in my networks are average middle class, working class people that don't have the luxuries to think about adventure, for example.
Yeah.
And therefore, I shouldn't think about it either, even if I could, even if I might. And therefore, that feeds into that vicious cycle of ending up in a state where you're tolerating the story of your life and the direction it's going in, wherever that ship is sailing. And then you end up in a situation where you feel, well, sure, I might set some goals, but I don't actually feel connected to anything. So, you know, I'll just take care of my family. Raising my kids is my mission, and that's fine. And that's good enough. I don't have kids either, so I definitely don't mean to be judgmental about that. I think that is a great responsibility as well. But I do feel, and I do find, and it comes up in my coaching practice a lot, that people acknowledge that they limit themselves to that because they're afraid of seeking out anything more. And the fear is not the only limiting factor. It's the fear brings with it this analysis paralysis and feeling of disconnection. So I'm curious to learn a little bit about your connection to adventure and all the cool things that you do and how your story shapes up. But also, what advice do you give people in whatever context who are at that point where they actually don't feel connected to anything?
Yeah, great lead up and good questions, man, as always. There's a couple things here. One is I often think about how ridiculous it is that we, and I hope this doesn't cause too much of an eye roll, but like how ridiculous it is that we lose our connection with play. You know, like when I don't know what age it was or what age it is generally when it needs to shift from how are you how are you putting the time that your experience you have now into growing or into doing something or into building or to be ready for a career versus I'm just going to go out and ride my bike, right? And I think that there's a couple of really important things that we need to do. And maybe this feeds into, your atypical midlife crisis, buy a convertible and drive around because there's this pent up like tension that we need to like just go do something and play. And, maybe a lot of, I don't know, I'm no psychologist, but maybe a lot of, life behaviors stem from putting the cap on this. So I think there's a couple parts here. For one is there is absolutely nothing wrong for us doing things for the benefit of our own joy. And in my mind, I think there's a strong caveat there as long as it's not hurting other people.
Sure.
Right. But I think, just the idea of someone going out and doing dance classes on Tuesday, not because, because with the self-help junkie world, that is because I want to post about it and I want other people to experience me having joy dancing, or in the self-determination development, and entrepreneur world is I'm dancing because I want to start a community and therefore get a bunch of subscribers to my dancing methodology and then sell that on later.
Yeah.
What happened to just freaking dancing, right? Like what happened to I'm a horrible dancer, so this is not a real life example, but but what happened to just going out on Tuesdays because that's just the thing that makes you feel good, and the play that we have around it. So I think there's a way to take control back, and I use control in particular. It's a bit of a heavy word, but I think it's needed to take control back of the ability and the direction that we have in our lives by pressing this pause button, this bit of a pause. There's a good friend of mine, his name's Craig Arnold in Australia, and he was my trainer. So he would train me for a lot of these kind of wild adventures that I've done. And he had this, it was a non-negotiable for him that once every, I think it was from memory, about every 3 months, he would go away. And again, he had the luxury of time because again, people's family circumstance and commitments are going to be different. But this is an example, and there's many ways to approach it. Mm-hmm. But he would go for a couple of days by himself out into out Jindabyne, out in the Australian Alps, and basically dig himself into a snow cave and basically hermit for 2 days with no phone, no nothing, and he would just do silence. His things were silence and solitude. And here in Norway, I find interestingly enough, people do that on a regular basis. They will go out they will go for hikes. I mean, Norwegian and hiking are like, they're just hand in glove. And Norwegians will go for hikes by themselves. They say a very common exercise for two Norwegian men is to go for a 6-hour hike and neither of them speak, and they just love silence and solitude. And I think there's a lot of power in that because we need to nurture this self relationship as well. So I think one, pausing the Netflix, pausing the inputs, the TV, very much the social media, all that stuff, and just giving yourself a little bit of space to be able to reconnect and breathe and just know who you are, re-know who you are. I know that's bad English, but reconnect, re-know yourself. And then from that place of, again, it's just it's these two things that I love coming back to. What is the stuff that makes me feel good? And it's not always going to be the thing. And that's an issue as well, because if you become known for someone that enjoys swimming, off the top of my head, then everyone's going to go, Dev, how's swimming going? You haven't gone swimming for a while. And maybe 5 years later, you're sick of swimming. You don't want to swim anymore. And so, but you're not going to know that. And because sometimes you're really, okay, well, I actually need to quit this Saturday morning swimming group because now it's a burden. I don't enjoy it. That was me back then, but I don't want to swim anymore. Now I want to X, whatever that is. but giving yourself a little bit of space, even if it's at work over your lunch break, just going for a walk and coffee with yourself and just be there and just kind of think about, what are some things that just make me happy? Not what do I want to do? What do I want to be? What am I trying to achieve? Not that stuff. What's the stuff that just makes you happy? Maybe it's, and that's where I get some wild ideas for these adventures that I keep talking about. But maybe it's like I want to learn to unicycle. I don't know. Like, and then so from that place, building in a little bit of playfulness of like, oh, this could be interesting if, and then therein lies that third magical part of, so first part, hitting reset, just building as much as you can for as long as you can. And if you have the gift of time on that because your life is like that, great, use it. If you don't, just the same. Take 10 minutes, take whatever it is you can, hit reset and just think, who am I now? What is it, the stuff that makes me happy? Not with a beer in your hand, doesn't have to be social, doesn't have to be, but just what are the things that make me happy? What stuff is interesting? Where can I build play on that? And then the magic third bit is, how do other people feel around me when I'm operating from that place? And those are the things that re-steer ships, I think.
Mm. Do you find people are more tired these days?
Funny you say that. So my girlfriend is a nutritional psychologist, and she's a presenter as well. So she's doing keynote speaking around Europe.
Okay.
And one question she's getting asked about more and more in briefings for events is if she can talk about hidden fatigue and fatigue that's taking place in the workplace. And I think that is really, I think it's interesting. And yes, I think the answer is yes, from my perspective. And I'm not surprised. We have so many inputs and there are so many notifications and there are so many things that invade our space, so how, unless we just have a really good way, and some people maybe do, I'm not one of them, have a really good way of drawing boundaries and not letting things come in without being quite strict. So I'm quite strict on my routines. Like, there's no phones in the bedroom. Like there's no, at least for myself, my partner's very much the same, just naturally, that was her way as well. There's certain measures that we put in place just to make sure that we're breathing, in our own flow. It doesn't always work, but the best that we can. And so because of the way that things are, for most people, how can we not be tired? Unless we take that back. Yeah, for sure. Interesting question.
Yeah, the thing that made me ask the question, I was empathizing with a few people I know as you're saying this, and sometimes I'm one of them. I'm not sure if I'm one of them right now, but I don't think I am. But I know a few people who are, who, when they're listening to the kind of advice that you're sharing, they're like, Josh, I hear what you're saying. It sounds great, but man, I'm just tired with life. And my idea of connecting with myself is sitting down and reading a book or watching some TV and just unwinding, because that's the only rest that I get. Based on what I read between the lines and what you were saying and what I believe anyway, so I won't put words in your mouth, is that that's not actually rest. Most of the time anyway. Sometimes it's a break from the kind of stimulation that they might be tired from, but it's only being replaced by a different kind of stimulation. And it's not the kind of rest that you're championing and advocating for, where, you might go on a 6-hour hike and not say anything, but it's more creating the space to tell your own mind to shut the F up and listen to what emerges from that. But I do find people are just more tired. And when they're tired, it feels harder to even be motivated to find the energy to then do the things that result in connecting with yourself or anything else that might motivate you to become more like an adventurer like Josh Stinton.
Yeah. Absolutely. Imagine the idea of some Yahoo like myself, popping up on a screen and saying, you should take on, this is not my message, but if I were to say, like, you should take on adventures to support children's charities, and people like, oh,
Yeah.
I mean, just the idea of bolting on more, and that even the thought of that is tiring. Certainly a lot of people I know, they're running at pretty full capacity. There's a lot of things happening. I mean, it's not the right capacity, but it's just full of stuff, right?
Yeah.
We've got things happening. And maybe for many people it is the right stuff. So again, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone in particular, but it's the idea of, if my schedule is full, say I've got things, more, it feels like from when I wake up to when I go to bed, my time is already spoken for. There's already things that are calling for. And now you're telling me I need to focus on my diet?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're telling me, oh, nice, Josh. Yeah, sure. Go take 2 days in the forest by myself. Like, I'm sure the expletive words that come out with that as well. So it's definitely not that. I mean, but if we all have the same time, right? Which we do,
Mhm.
but where are the things, even if temporarily, I mean, the idea of, you just make a lifestyle change, take on an Ironman and train every morning and get up earlier, and life is going to be more fulfilling. BS. Like, no one wants to hear that. I don't want to hear that. But it's like, what, again, from the things that make you happy, if you were able to just press pause for a bit. So not trying to ask or challenge or accuse anyone of not doing the right things, but it's, if we were able to just press pause on our routine for a bit, because sometimes life has a way of pressing pause for us. And that's when things get really tricky. It could be any number of things, but sometimes life happens and you're like, that's not a part of my routine. So how to prep yourself for it? Like, so if we pause and just find out, what, if we look at your patterns, if I get home and in between coming home from work and I'm super tired and I've changed out of my work socks and I've got my relaxed socks on and I'm on the couch scrolling through social media, waiting for dinner, whatever it is, but finding a way to press pause and then just taking some things out to just give yourself a little bit of space. I know, like, meditation and mindfulness and all this stuff has got all sorts of hashtag connotations that have gone all over the place, but who cares? Just give yourself a little bit of space.
Yeah.
And to find, again, what makes you feel good. And I don't think it's appropriate to try to drive into anyone that, what would make you feel good is if you hit the gym more, as if you did this, if you did yoga, or now do Pilates, it's what makes you feel good, what excites you. How are people positively benefited by you when you're in that space? Okay, so from that space, what are some of the things you need to do to get there? Kind of like the backcasting we were talking about before, kind of.
Amen.
It's just, what are the things from a place of feeling good? Because the problem is, we do a bunch of things for the intention / hope that it's going to make us feel good. And that is building in more and more stuff into that precious little time that we've got every day. Rather retrofit that, as opposed to, my girlfriend has a great expression for it. She calls it fast fun. It's fast fun to, like, okay, well, I don't really have much going on. Let's go out for a beer, or let's do this, or let's just something that's just going to quickly hit the fun button. But fast fun, it doesn't have a lot of long-term positive implications usually. It's and some need it, no judgment here, but if we're hitting the fast fun button too much, she always says that at home. She's like, "Is that a fast fun thing?" I'm like, "Oh, dang it, yeah." Like, so if we're hitting the fast fun button too much, we're not actually laying the groundwork to get to a pathway of happiness. I mean, that's just mess, So, but if we just give ourselves a little bit of space to say, this is the thing that I think I'm going to feel really good at doing, or feel really good because I'm doing. What are the things I need to do to get there? Oh, well, rarely, so follow me on this example. If I take 30 minutes out of my day today, it's the morning, we're coming up on 9 or so, and this afternoon, if I take 30 minutes out of my day and I go out and sit in my yard, or go to a park, or go to wherever, go to the library, just to find a place to be quiet. And if I sit and think, okay, some of the things that make me feel good are actually, it would be nice to take a weekend trip, or it would be nice to find a community center where I can maybe meet and have. This is actually a real thing in my head where I can meet and maybe a couple of hours one weekend volunteer at an elderly home in here in Norway, because then I could practice my Norwegian and maybe spend some time with people that haven't had a family visitor in a while. That would make me feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that could also maybe make someone else feel good. What are the things I need to do to get that? Okay, well, I need to find a little space to find out where an elderly care facility is that allows for that, or if there's a service for that. I need to also find space in my life and social life to be able to get a weekend day free to be able to do that. Those are the things. In that scenario, nowhere in that scenario is I need to go out and have a few beers with my friends, because that's not a part of it. That's a fast fun thing. So delineating these things of we often have these, my day is so full because we're hitting the fast fun button, or we're scrolling, or because those are things that just dopamine releases that make us feel good right now. But none of that stuff is putting us on the trajectory of getting us into a place that's actually going to feel good.
Yeah.
I believe.
No, I believe that too. I love that concept, fast fun. I think that people spend a lot of time these days looking for what can they add to their schedule in short bursts to get reprieve from what's taking up most of their time and energy and attention. And what I hear you say is that rather than taking an additive approach, if you want to lead your life by design, first see what you need to get rid of or can get rid of to clear some space to just breathe. You said earlier, actually, which I like that expression in this context as well.
Absolutely.
Are you familiar with Cal Newport's deep focus? The idea of deep focus?
I've heard of it, but I haven't had time to read it. No, I haven't gotten around to reading it yet.
In extremely simplistic terms, deep focus basically advocating for this idea that there are some things that you can only get to when you've got enough sufficient time in one sitting to actually focus on, as opposed to trying to do everything in short bursts, because the context switching that you have to do to go from one context to another, one activity, one task to another, takes up energy in itself. So you need to incorporate blocks of time that allow for deep focus to engage the parts of your brain that are going to allow you to do certain kinds of work, which is, it's very relevant to ways of working, and it's great. I think I don't necessarily suggest you need to read the book, but it's cool to look up the concept.
I've written it down. I'm going to read it. Thank you for that.
No worries. The reason I think about this is because I think it translates to not just deep focus for work, but also needing a certain, a minimum threshold amount of time to actually create that space. Some people say, if you're going to start meditating, just start with 5 minutes a day. And I think that's fine to, if you are completely chaotic and you never have any sense of sitting with yourself. But really, 5 minutes is not going to do the same thing that a weekend away is going to do for you, with the intention of actually connecting with yourself and what gives you joy that might put you in a state where you can reflect on what does me being in that positive state do for other people around me, as you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, I really like that. And I will take this up. I've taken a little note here on the book. Thank you for that. And because it's not something that we just get. It's kind of like, I say the same thing with motivation or with focus. It's not you do a number of things. It's like, okay, I've invested enough 5-minute deposits into my focus bank, so after a little while I should just have focus. It's like, what? It's an exercise. So I mean, thank you for the nudge on this, because these are constantly things that we're learning, relearning, and sometimes unlearning, different ways of what focus and clarity means to us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very visual person. As we were speaking, I was thinking about a person in their ways, adding on things, because there's no shortage of services constantly knocking on our door to add on to our life, just to get a little handhold into the stuff that we've got going on. And isn't this funny? Like, when we say the word hoarder, there's certain things that can come to mind, and that can very much be a circumstance for people where they need some professional help from. So I'm not taking that term lightly, but when if someone is like my father, I I love the guy, but he gets so emotionally attached to anything that's in our family that he will keep it. Like he's got mailboxes from old houses, Dev, because that's where the family used to get their mail. For God's sakes, the guy is just so, and he loves this stuff around, and I'm not gonna say he's a hoarder, but it's just like it's a lot. We can understand that because we can see it. We can picture what it would be like to empty storage units and filling various trucks and the time involved and how much that is not ideal. Why is it any different when we're speaking in terms of things that we're carrying for our own daily lives that are taking our own energy? Like, I'd say that the majority of us have, if you could visualize it, all the stuff that we're carrying around. We just unfortunately can't see it because it's not a physical thing, but it doesn't mean it isn't as heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If we could see all the stuff we carry around, I bet you some of us would go, oh my goodness. Okay. I didn't realize. Yeah, maybe I can offload that app. Maybe 7 hours of video game time on the weekend isn't necessary. Maybe all of this social activity, whatever it is. I think it would be really nice because once we're able to just find our shape in that, then you can find space to say, okay, now I can take 2 hours on a weekend. Maybe not this weekend because it's already spoken for. Maybe not next because the in-laws are coming over, but maybe that third weekend, but put it in the calendar. Take it seriously. Take those 2 hours or that 30 minutes or whatever it is you can get for yourself and just kind of connect a bit, because that's when, how of course we're tired. And how are we supposed to be able to have clarity to understand where we're going or what we want when we don't have any ability to consume anything else outside of what's taking our daily lives? So rather than looking around from a position of what we don't have, I don't have time, I don't have energy, I'm tired all the time. Yeah, that's fair enough. But then just switch to, if life is pretty fun that way, you could switch and think like, what do I want? What if this was different? If I did have time, how would that feel? How would I be able to operate and be a little bit different in that? And that goes back to then the way that we show up impacts other people. So back to lead by design. Yes, it is self-leadership, but also, whether we like it or not, the way that we're leading ourselves is a massive megaphone for the people around us that we're also trying to lead in our teams. And even not even in our teams, but in our community, the way our neighbors see us, certainly the way your family does. These things they're not just nice to haves. Sometimes we actually have to get pretty serious about the way that we're managing our self-time.
Mm. So to take a little slight tangent, you call yourself a charity adventurer.
Mm.
Tell me, what does that mean? And how do you manage the weight of that label with your identity?
Oh man, that's a cool question. So the charity adventurer thing, where that comes from is, for the past 10 years, I have been taking on wild, sometimes / ridiculous physical challenges in things I have no idea how to do. And I do these things to raise money and awareness for children's charities, for kids that need help. So I don't earn any money from these adventures. I never, ever will. 100% of the money that gets donated goes directly to the charity. So it doesn't even go through my accounts, like none of that. It's just, it's a way for me to give back, but also it's fun. Like I enjoy the people I get to meet. I enjoy the children I get to meet and work with in various children's charities. I enjoy the experiences that it gives me. So the charity adventurer title came from the Today Show in Australia, actually. So I was there on the Today Show for the first adventure, which was doing this the hardest ski race in the world, cross-country ski in the US. They call it Nordic skiing. And I've never skied a day in my life. So the morning of the race was the first time I ever skied. It was absolutely wild. I ended up completing the race, which is still surprising me on a daily basis. But that was a heck of a lot of fun. And I did that for the grief counseling camp, Feel the Magic, that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So I went on TV and talked about that. The next time I went on TV was because I took on a mountain unicycle race. So I represented Australia in the world's biggest mountain unicycle race in San Sebastian in Spain. And I went back on the Today Show to talk about what I was doing. And when I went out, they just called it like, okay, the charity adventure is back. I was like, what? Like that, that wasn't like, I'm like, I'm going to call myself the charity adventure. It was just like live on television. I was like, okay, but yep, that's me, and so the weight of it, to be honest, there's not a lot of weight of it. I've done 5 big adventures so far, and I'm going to continue to do them. There are definitely heavy moments in terms of planning, production, training. Like as soon as we are wrapped up with our conversation here, I'm off to the gym, because I build this time in because it's something that I've learned to prioritize. And I'm there. Sometimes I bite off more than I can chew. For a long time, I was talking about doing this sky run where I wanted to build this airship with that's in play, but it's probably going to be a much longer burn than I expected it to be because there's so many regulations, and it's actually going to cost a lot more money than I thought to build this airship.
Right.
And so, short note, people are probably, what airship? So I wanted to build a contraption, basically. So it's well, in Norwegian, they live along like an airship, like a blimp. And underneath it, there's I'm thinking like a treadmill. So when I run on the treadmill, it turns carbon propellers to make the airship move through the sky. And I want to run a marathon in the sky is basically what my goal is. And I'm close to that. I have the designs for it. I've actually been working with the former head of the International Space Station for NASA. It's absolutely wild. Like this team it's super fun. But I keep hitting these roadblocks in terms of cost and various other things. And basically it's detracting from me being able to raise money for kids now. So I think I'm kind of pausing that a bit. It's not going to go away. I'm still going to work on that, but there's other things. So my own commitment can be the heavy part. But other than that, I don't find a lot of weight in it because of the impacts. The kids that I get to meet, the money that gets raised to support children's charities around the world, I get a lot of energy from. And and I'll go until I feel like I've lost my mission in it. Being I'm exhausted, and again, I need to take space in myself to find out if I'm being honest about that. So my body just doesn't let me do it anymore. So yeah, I'm. So that's kind of the journey. I've bicycled across the Atlantic Ocean. I hand cycled the entire length of Japan. I've done an Arctic mountain bike race, actually 700 kilometers across the Arctic. It was just, there's all sorts of really wild things. And this is all coming from a guy. I got kicked off the football team in high school because I'm an awful sports person. My coach actually said I'd be a better camera person, and I'm not even good at that. So it's a different narrative, and I'm just like challenging it. So I speak a lot about that in my keynotes, but that's changed a little bit. I used to talk a lot. It used to be quite like motivational and quite funny, and how these things came to life and how people can pursue their own goals, like their own North Star. I do talk about that a lot, but actually what I'm speaking about more and more is more self-leadership, like what we're speaking about now, Dad, like what your mission is with this. On what are the fundamental, like what I don't want to be too distancing. It's like, okay, great. Well, you've got a lifestyle where you can put a lot of spare time and maybe some spare funding. Cause I fund these adventures myself. So like some spare funding aside, but that's not in most people's wheelhouse of interest. They've got other things going on, which I understand and respect. So I'm not trying to inspire people to do more adventures, but really it's what are the self-leadership techniques? What are the skills that come in? And a lot of it is exactly around what we're talking about now. And this conversation's given me more insight and more tact on that. So thank you very much for this, Deb. It's how do we press pause? How do we connect with ourselves to be going in a humble, happy way towards things that make us feel good, and how do we inspire other people to do the same? Is that not a high level definition of leadership and management? You know,
Yeah, that's interesting. I deliberately didn't want to talk too much about your adventures in this podcast conversation specifically because I'm very selfish and there are other things I want to talk about.
cool,
But I
man.
really hope people go to your profiles, follow you, look up the stories. There are a couple of other podcasts that you've done in the past that I listened to in prep, and I know that they go into some of the stories, and they're very inspiring. And I don't think inspiration has to be relatable. There's a lot of inspiration I get from lifestyles, people's certain accomplishments that I don't necessarily aspire to emulate, but I get inspiration that a person has had a spark, had the energy to pursue it, had the resourcefulness to go and find the right connections and technologies and logistics and made it all work. And you've done that in buckets and spades, and that is super inspiring. So I hope you don't.
Thanks.
I hope you don't get tired of talking about the stories where they're relevant, even if they're not relatable to everyone. It's very
Oh,
inspiring.
I really appreciate that. That's a very kind nudge, and I can tell you, I will never get tired of talking about it. Just as long as yeah, that's a really good nudge on your part. And I appreciate that, because sometimes it's like as long as they're relatable and as long as they're not distancing, as long as they're stories that are useful. Because earlier on in my speaking career, I'd get up on stage and tell the funny story or however, but then I realized, I'm like, well, maybe I'm just like a Netflix episode on legs. It's really got to give to people. And that's why I've really, over the years, have been really honed in on like usable practices,
Yeah.
actual tangible things that people can then put into their lives. But really, those are what we're talking about. Those are what you're naturally honed into on this conversation. You're a very good host, my friend. And that is,
Thank you.
how pleasure. How do we carry these certain lessons in a daily life that means something to us? And for me, it's very much, yeah, there was a guy that I used to work with in Australia. He used to say, a boat with no rudder will just end up where it's going. And I love that. It's like we have to kind of have our hands on the wheel, because if we're just taking on more, signing up for another membership for a thing, and okay, well, this new food delivery diet is going to be the thing, and we're always outsourcing our potential for peace when it's here. We just need to connect to that on our own. And then when we do that, we show up different. And when we show up different, we're better leaders. It's easy, but it's not simple. Or simple, it's not easy. Yeah. Sorry.
That's an amazing call. Stop outsourcing your potential for peace. That is a very catchy
Yeah.
line. There's a keynote in there, I think, for you.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to write that down. That just came out of nowhere, and I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, please go for it. Stop outsourcing your potential for peace. Let me know what you turn that into. I am keen to follow
I
along.
absolutely will. It's interesting because tomorrow I'm sitting down to write a keynote for a talk I've got coming up in Lithuania at the end of the month, and I think that's going to be the focus. So thank you, Dev. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. I have this model that I sometimes speak about. I haven't written about this yet. Otherwise, I'd send you a link. But if I do, I'll share with you. But it's this model of communication specifically for creating some sort of an impact for someone to go and do something. And there's 3 stages: inspiration, motivation, and empowerment. Inspiration is when you're saying something to somebody and they get a feeling of, wow, that is so cool. Motivation is, wow, that is so cool. I also want to do that. And there's that inspiration turns into some drive to move and have some forward momentum to do that thing. And then there's empowerment, where someone's inspired in the audience. They're feeling motivated. They want to do the thing as well. They're not just feeling that sense of energy that is ephemeral, but not necessarily connected or attached to any movement or goal or intention. The empowerment part is then, okay, now I have some idea of how I might go and do that. And I think when you look at that from a teaching, coaching, speaking perspective, you can inspire somebody, and that still creates energy in them. They might not necessarily know what to do with it. And then the inspiration finishes, they go home, they go back to their lives, and that's it. The motivation might get them a little bit more activated to go and figure out how to do something, but they might not have the tools. And then if they go back home and they're stuck in their own ecosystem and ecology and don't have necessarily the connections or education to figure out how to act on that motivation, the motivation dies. Eventually the inspiration will die and they'll go back to the starting board. But if you give them empowerment or education, you give them actually tell them how to act on the motivation and inspiration, then you're taking them much further. But you can't always do that in a 40-minute keynote. So the model I was taught along the way and that shaped up into this 3-stage thing is that sometimes inspiration is enough, and the people that are innately motivated in the audience will reach out to you for motivation. Sometimes inspiration and motivation enough, and the people that are motivated enough will reach out to you for the education or empowerment. But I guess it's our responsibility in the roles that, the kind of work that you and I do, to make sure that we're giving people an opportunity to go from one stage to the next. If they are feeling inspired, how do we then make that inspiration also motivating and then empower people to do something with that motivation? That's what I get the sense that you're doing. But I think that definitely doesn't undervalue or make redundant the inspiration that comes from your adventures.
It's a very, very kind nod. And that's a really good model. That's a really solid model. And it makes me think there was a guy also in Lithuania. I do a fair few talks in the Baltics lately, and there's a guy that gave a talk on the wow effect. And his whole thing was like the history or the etymology of inspiration, because it just means to inspire. So it's those moments of like, that's like inspire means to breathe in. It's quite, it's so interesting, those moments, like, and so it's not always that, you're going to go directly from those wow moments into, I'm going to do something now. But imagine if it was a life of a lot of even motivation or empowerment, but not as much inspiration. Oh, that's a sad place. We got to have the inspiration. We have the fun in breathing as well. I think that cascade effect is a really, really good thing to keep in top of mind. And also it's probably very helpful for those that are in the service space of helping, coaching, speaking, facilitating for other people, but also in a daily life, being able to recognize that, sometimes the things that inspire us might just be powerful enough to motivate us. And if they do that, then maybe there's an onus, like a responsibility in there for people to then go, well, and there's all sorts of tools around us to be able to help with that. But now I can seek out some practical advice on how to implement this or how to implement change. So that inspiration, motivation, empowerment is really, really cool. It's a good flow.
Yeah, thank you. You also made me think about this in a way I've never thought about before, which is backwards. That maybe, and I'm just wondering this out loud, I don't know the answer to this, but maybe I wonder if we have in our society in general too much empowerment as it is. We've got too much education, too much information, too many resources, but we don't know what to look for because we're missing inspiration.
Yeah,
we don't, and it comes back to what we've been talking so much about, which is we don't create the space to go into a forest for long enough or sit with ourselves for long enough to actually connect with ourselves. We look to all of these empowerment opportunities to outsource our potential for peace, as you beautifully said earlier.
Yeah, that is really good. I think a lot of it does come back to that. I hope this conversation gives, I hope it gives a lot to many people, but I really hope that there's someone that listens to this and goes, you know what, we all know that it's not great to be laying there in bed first thing in the morning or end of the day scrolling or answering messages or being quite responsive. We all understand how that feels in our energy. Mm-hmm. But I hope that this hits that person and they say, you know, I'm just gonna go for a walk and leave my phone at home or put my phone on silent and not track it and upload and post about the walk that I just did. It's just for you. It's just for you. Look at it as if, one last point I'd like to make that reminds me of, there's a documentary I watched not too long ago it was about Steven Spielberg. And someone close to him said Steven Spielberg works like he works for Steven Spielberg, right? So it's like he takes it very seriously on how he's behaving, on how he's. So it's almost like sometimes if you care, I mean, and hopefully we all do, you care about your wellness, that you will behave as if you are answering to yourself at the end of the day. Right? Like, how did you take care of yourself today? Yeah, so like so if you were at the end of the day having to report back to you, how did you look after yourself? That's an interesting question. Or at the end of the week, I mean, we all have some wild days and all that. That's fine. But at the end of the week, at the end of the month, because at some point, at the end of something, you're going to have to kind of answer that to yourself. Yeah. And better to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And if you don't, at least what I find is that there will be an inexplicable restlessness that just festers inside you.
Yep. And big surprise, we're, having issues when it comes to retention. We're having issues when it comes to fatigue. We're having all of these things. Mm-hmm. Like big surprise, because we're not giving ourselves that rest. When we were kids, we'd go run our behinds off and building things and riding bikes and falling out of trees or whatever. We needed to have nap time.
Yeah, playtime as well and nap time. Yeah. Josh, there's been so much in this conversation. We just have a little bit of time left. I've been wanting to ask you a question, a little bit in jest, but it comes from a place of sincerity. Although I feel like we've just perhaps actually answered this question in a way, but I want to ask it anyway. So much like in Zoolander, there's the very important question, but why male models? I wanted to ask you, but why keynote speakers?
I think that's awesome. Look, it's hard for me to speak on behalf of keynote speakers or the craft of, but I think that storytelling in its rawest form is one of our greatest forms of artwork. I think that it's back to what my grandfather used to say, it's not an opportunity, it's a responsibility. And if you have a story that can help someone, and help can mean empower, motivate, or inspire, or just make people laugh. I went to a comedy show here in Oslo, Jimmy Carr, last week, and there was 6,000 people, which is big for Oslo. The place was sold out. It was a good indicator that people still like to laugh, and even so, though some of his jokes are pretty wild, but just the ability to ship an idea or experience or thought and have it rebuilt in someone else's mind in a way that means something to them and create a smile or create an emotion or maybe a tear or a laugh. I hope we never lose that, and as motivational speaker or keynote speakers or whatever, people shipping messages and connecting, because ultimately when you're on that stage, it's not about you. You've already had the experience that was about you. You've had your day in the sun. Now it's about them. Now it's, being able to give information back, or a story or emotion or inspiration, as you said before, that might help them on their journey. That to me, that's why I call it art, because obviously I'm biased. That's now what I do for a living, but I just love it.
That's amazing. I love that answer. That really inspires me to look for more opportunities to just tell stories and inspire, and feel like that is and can be enough in and of itself as well. It doesn't have to lead to some 2-year-long transformation project for it to be worthwhile.
I love that, man. That is so good. And that's a kind reminder, because even I can get lost in that narrative sometimes of, but we need the 5-step plan.
Exactly. I am very keen to speak about the 5-step plans, maybe in another conversation when you come back, if you would be so gracious.
I'd love
You've
to.
been very generous with your time. I'm really keen to talk about business design, innovation. You've got a wealth of experience and knowledge in that realm that I'm very passionate about as well. And I'm really passionate about how these kinds of conversations come together and converge and help each other, because there's a lot of what we've spoken about that is really relevant in the workplace, and yet people switch off from it because they feel like, well, I'm in work mode. This is not practical to apply in workplaces, when you and I know that it not only is it practical, it's perhaps even more critical and essential to do so. So I'd love to have you back at some point, and we can chat about that as well. I do want to finish with one question before I risk cutting into your gym workout. It's a question I try and ask everyone when I have the opportunity, particularly on the show. What does leading by design mean for you?
I think it's making a conscious decision of how we show up, because whether we like it or not, how we show up, who we are on every day, as Shakespeare always said, all the world is a stage. But it's unfortunately so true. How we show up, whether it's on social media or in person, but I'm really thinking more in person, it directly impacts other people. If you're passionate about something, it will impact someone else. It will either inspire them to passion, or it will remind them kindly that passion exists. If you're a driven person, if you're frustrated, however you show up will invite or remind that behavior exists in the world. So choose wisely.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for the reminder of passion, with all of your passion and the great work that you do. Is there anywhere that you would like to send people? Anything you'd like to draw their attention to in particular?
Yeah, I'd say just come connect with me on LinkedIn. Maybe join the help chat. I'd love to have a 15-minute slot and have a chat see what's on people's mind. Just like I met great people, and so I got to meet your great self, man. So yeah, hit me up on there. There's all sorts of things that I post about updates with training, and I'm going to start posting more about books that I've read and things that I like about them across LinkedIn and across Instagram. So also, if I can ask, if just like you've done with the deep focus, if people can recommend books, recommend articles, things that gave them inspiration, I'm always open for that. So yeah.
Nice. I'll put some links in the show notes. Mate, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. You've been really generous with your time. Really appreciate it. I hope you have a great work. Look forward to talking again.
Thanks. This is the best way I could have started my Monday morning. Thanks for having me, man.
My pleasure.